All right, we're live. I'm Matt Lewis. He's Charlie Sykes. Together, we are Sykes and Lewis. Read him at To the Contrary on Substack. And of course, the great book, How the Right Lost Its Mind.
Needs to be
Charlie,
updated constantly. Yeah.
yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Today's election day. What
Yeah,
are you
I know.
thinking? How you feeling?
We're gonna be so much smarter tomorrow, aren't we? We'll have all the hot takes and everything. Um,
I think we know a lot today. I do. I
okay,
could be
tell me what
wrong.
we know. Tell me what you know.
All right, here's what we know. Abigail Spanberger will win in Virginia. She's going to be governor.
Yeah,
We know that Zora Mamdani will be the next mayor of New York.
very
So
likely.
we've got of the marquee. I mean, I think we know that Proposition 50 will pass in California, allowing them to create
Yeah,
5 Democratic House seats to offset Texas.
yeah.
I think the one thing of the marquee races, the one thing we don't quite know is New Jersey. I think Mikey Sherrill will win, but I think Jack Ciattarelli, the Republican, there's a chance he surprises everyone there. And then in the Virginia Attorney General's race, I think that's really the one to keep an eye on. I don't know what's going to happen there.
Yeah, no, I think the New Jersey race is going to be one of those mood vibe races. If the Republicans were to flip New Jersey, this would be a blow to Democrats. There's no question about it. That would be. But I agree with you. I think she's likely to win. We'll see. Look, I think that both parties are going to claim that they had a good night tonight. Because I do think the Democrats are probably going to win most of the big races, but Republicans that I know do not even try to conceal their giddiness over having Mamdani to kick around over the next year. I know all the people who say it's just a local election. Why would anybody care? And it shouldn't. I mean, look, New York mayor's races are not predictors of national trends. But I'm willing to go out on a lim and suggest that Republicans are going to spend maybe $100 million, um, making him the face of the Democratic Party. And I think that there are a lot of folks that are, perhaps a little naive about how much Oppo research there is and how it's going to play in flyover country over here. So the Republicans are going to seize upon that. The Democrats are going to get off the map, and they're going to win some key elections. By the way, I went back and I read a piece I wrote for Politico 4 years ago after Youngkin won. And that was a kind of a warning sign for Democrats
Yeah.
at that point. And they sort of went through like how crazy and reckless the Republicans had been, and asked the question. So Democrats really need to ask themselves, why can't you beat these guys? I mean, they're all like crazy city, and yet they were winning in places like Virginia. Today might flip that script, and people say, okay, we learned from this. Now we are winning in states like Virginia with very, very compelling, very strong centrist candidates. Abigail Spanberger is almost the model, I think, of the kind of centrist who can win in these swing states. I wish she was as famous as Zoran is.
Well, and speaking of Zoran, I think look, on one hand, yes, Fox News will love to make him the boogeyman. They want to demonize him. And I think there's a lot of material to work with. He's Muslim. There's always New York City, right? He is in favor of things like, I don't know, free buses and government controlled grocery stores. And so there's a lot of material to work with. I think the problem, and I don't know if you saw Saturday Night Live this past week, it was worth seeing this week. It's not always worth seeing. This week it was good. And it had the cold open was actually the New York City mayoral debate. And they just had a joke about Mamdani smiling, and I'm telling you, he does have, I think he's going to be a little harder to demonize than
I
people
think
may
maybe he will
think
be.
because he has that
Well,
happy warrior likability.
well, and that counts for a lot. And then of course you also have this weird moment where the right, the MAGA right, was all gearing up to go after left wing anti-Semitism, right?
Right.
And think about how much the Trump administration has invested in going after universities, for being anti-Semitic. What do we have? This absolute shitstorm of a civil war over right-wing anti-Semitism. I mean, this is really something.
Yeah, I'm writing
Tucker
about this
Carlson,
right.
Nick Fuentes.
I'm writing
Yeah,
about
tell
this
me.
right now for my
Yeah.
column for the LA Times and my Substack. And Charlie, Yeah, I mean, I'm sure everyone probably knows about this, but Nick
Mhm.
Fuentes is this white nationalist, Holocaust denier, and he
Will
was
not.
recently on Tucker Carlson's very popular podcast. It was a softball interview. A lot of people see it as sort of Carlson laundering or platforming Fuentes, and
It
then
was.
Kevin Roberts, the head of the Heritage Foundation, comes out and says, um, "We're friends with Tucker, no enemies to our right." And so there's been this sort of backlash, uproar amongst Ted Cruz, Ben Shapiro, that even Heritage Foundation staffers are speaking out against their boss, which
Right.
violates their one voice policy. The Wall Street Journal editorial board has chimed in. Charlie, here's what I'm curious about. Why this, right? Because there have been every other day, there's something crazy that happens. Like people probably don't know Lauren Boebert. Do you know what her Halloween costume was this year? Did you see this?
No, what was it? I could
She
guess, but I
dressed
couldn't.
up as an immigrant and her boyfriend dressed up as an ICE agent. That was her costume. Um,
No,
yeah.
no.
And the fact that
I
no
thought she
one
dressed
knows
up as Beetlejuice.
that was
Bring back
last year, right?
the happy memories.
That was her
No. So
costume
why,
last
why,
year.
why, why this? Why was there not a civil war with Laura Loomer or any of the other
Yeah.
nut jobs? Or I mean, and the administration is stacked with people who have very, very sketchy background. Um, you know, I- let me just sort of go reverse engineer this. I'm somewhat surprised that people are surprised by this. I mean, this has been going on for the last 10 years. We used to call this the alt-right. And one of the things that Trump did, whatever Trump's own personal beliefs are, is he gave them winking permission, right? He
Yeah.
opened the door to all the mouth breathers to come back. He validated them. They were the very good people. He he platformed them. He encouraged them. He had them over for dinner. Nick Fuentes went to dinner with the president of the United States, who said afterwards, "I like this guy. He gets me." And then people are amazed that this is happening right now. But I guess this is also that yes, there are still red lines. They keep moving the Overton window of what's acceptable. JD Vance, keeps talking about the Haitians eating dogs and all the other racist dog whistles and everything. But it turns out, Matt, amazingly, being a fan of Adolf Hitler and being a Holocaust denier is still a red line on the right. And interesting thing is that Kevin Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation, apparently missed that. He apparently
Hmm.
thought that there were no red lines. There are no enemies on the right, means even neo Nazis like Nick Fuentes. It turns out that maybe Adolf Hitler is still the line. But think how far that line is.
Yeah.
How far do we have to go to hit a line? Now, having said that, keep an eye on JD Vance. JD Vance, number one, remember when all of those young Republicans had the text messages where they were talking about Hitler and gassing their opponent? Who came to their defense? JD Vance, because he thought that was his constituency. Then he's asked a question at one of those TPUSA things down at Ole Miss, really anti-Semitic question about, the Jews, are against, against us. Why do we support them? He doesn't challenge the question, and he seems to almost feed into it. JD Vance is unwilling to break with this new alt right, even as this is breaking up. Now, I mean, again,
And they've attacked him. I mean,
yeah,
Fuentes specifically has aggressively gone after JD Vance, called him fat, called him gay, attacked his wife, Usha, said calling Vance a race mixer. And I'm paraphrasing here, but Fuentes said things like, you're going to be the great savior of the white working class. You, who has a son named Vivek,
um,
you're going to be the savior of white Christians. And so JD, if there's ever a time where he ought to, uh, maybe feel a little pride, I don't know, anger, righteous indignation, and take a chance and go
watch.
after somebody, it would be now.
I don't know if he's going to be. I don't think. I just think that he has decided he's not going to be outflanked on the right. And by the way, we have just kind of a bullshit, Schadenfreude moment here. It, all of these folks, like Dinesh D'Souza and Vivek Ramaswamy and Ted Cruz, who are shocked to find out there's so much hatred and race baiting on the right. It's like, where have you guys been for the last decade? You have looked the other way, you have encouraged us, and suddenly they're acting like, I'm really shocked. Where did this come from? How long has this been going on? Well, MAGA has embraced these folks for so long. It is interesting. I'll be interested. Do you think Kevin Roberts survives as president of the Heritage Foundation?
Yeah, I think he does. I think he does because I think it's a sign of how bad things are. It ought to be disqualifying, but I think he survives.
Well,
But
he threw his chief of
yeah,
staff under the bus.
yeah,
It was this kid. It was this kid who talked me into it. He said, "This is what the youngs want to hear, so I'm going to say this." And it turns out they don't. But yeah, it's an ugly scene, and I think maybe the good news is that for the first time you are seeing people say, hey, maybe we do need guardrails, maybe we do need have some of the gatekeepers who are back in. I mean, Ben Shapiro apparently devoted his entire show, right,
yeah.
ripping Tucker Carlson, but Tucker
Right. Ben,
Carlson
ben
didn't just drop out
Shapiro,
of the sky, right? I mean,
Ben
it's
Shapiro, who endorsed Donald Trump in 2024. Ben Shapiro, who platformed, I'll use that term of art, Candace Owens at the Daily Wire and made her famous and gave her this show. And so I do feel like, the monster is coming to devour some of the folks who fed that monster or created that
no
monster. I'm
kidding.
not saying like let me just give the caveats. Like, A, I welcome them finally coming to their senses and doing the right thing now. Um, and B, I don't remember what B was, but look, I think it's a good thing, but I think again, shocked that there's gambling in Rick's Cafe at Casablanca.
But I mean, part of the pattern has been that the ideas that were at the far edges of the fever swamp are now mainstream. One of the ideas that unfortunately is increasingly mainstream is anti-Semitism, and this becomes a dangerous moment if it becomes acceptable discourse on both the left and the right. Now, I by the way strongly believe, that you can disagree with the policies of the Israeli government
Sure.
without being anti-Semitic, but you can feel the old beast rising again, and people have opened the door to it. So, all
Mhm.
right, can we
Let
talk
me
about
say,
something else
Charlie,
I'm dreading?
well,
Yeah, okay, fine.
let me finish with this controversial
Yeah,
statement. Charlie, you and I have been pretty much OG, never Trump conservative. We have been
yeah.
opposing Trump and I think, but we saw the writing on the wall. I have to say, this will be controversial. If I were Jewish, I would be even more vigilant about this. I mean, you have people like Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro who have come under attack from Fuentes, and now they're pushing back, and I understand why they are. But Charlie, these guys are smarter than me. Ben Shapiro is like apparently brilliant, right? Didn't he realize that a populist nationalist movement that plays the victim card and divides Americans, like, just historically speaking, doesn't that usually don't those populist nationalists eventually get around to blaming Jews and the
Well, you're
globalists?
gonna
Like,
you're gonna trigger me now.
wasn't this
Yeah.
predictable? And
Yes,
shouldn't they have been
wait,
shouldn't they have been part of a bulwark against
yeah,
MAGA?
yes. The answer is yes, and they were warned explicitly, and people like Ben Shapiro actually did see it back in 2015 and 2016, and this makes it even worse that he saw it, he understood what the threat was, and he caved in anyway. Look, there's a lot in politics that is more commercial. It's more self promotional than it is principle based. But I remember thinking back in 2015 and 2016 that, and then by the way, my father was Jewish. So my whole family on that side is Jewish, and so I have that. I think I have that sensibility when that one of the things that distinguished some of the leading never Trumpers from the beginning was that if you look at them, I do think that Jewish conservatives saw this differently. I think they recognized the threat early on, and it's why you go through some of the lists, some of the most prominent never Trumpers, and for a long time it was almost sotto voce is like feels like the 1930s, doesn't it? And it felt like perhaps a little extreme, but I think there was a recognition that this is where it's going to go. And sure enough, here we are. And it's like, what were you thinking? Now, again, if you never saw it from the beginning, maybe you're surprised. But guys like Ben Shapiro, see, I actually hold him to a higher standard because he is smart. He's smart enough to know what he was doing. He was smart enough to know what he was embracing. He was smart enough to know what he was ignoring. So bleep him even now. That's
All right. Well, let's talk about something a little funnier. At least there's some comedic possibilities in this part of the discussion, and that is, did you see Donald Trump's Great Gatsby party? I
Oh my.
I didn't believe these videos and images at first. Honestly, like I'm always like, this is someone's trolling us. This is AI. But we're talking
I thought that several times.
decadent, bacchanalian. And then when you consider, Charlie, we've got like SNAP benefits being taken away. We've got a government shutdown. This guy is holding what looks like some sort of orgiastic, party
Yeah.
at Mar-a-Lago. And meanwhile, he's fixing up a bathroom, doing bathroom renovations, building a ballroom. I mean, the optics, the let them eat cake optics, Charlie, could not be starker.
No, it couldn't be. And this is worth spending some time on because like what is going on in their heads? Is it basically they're all out of F's to give that they just simply don't care, or that they are so divorced from reality that they don't see how it's going to be, or this is just an example of out of control arrogance and hubris, the sense we can do anything, we can get away with anything. But you think about, the metaphor alerts, within the last week, you have the president, posting a thing where he's shitting on the American people. And then a day later, he starts tearing down the East Wing of the White House. And then he holds the Great Gatsby party the night before 40 million people are going to lose their SNAP benefits. So you kind of wonder about their bubble. And by the way, let me connect this to another story that I'm going to write about in my newsletter today. You get a broader look at this and to the contrary. I want to talk about Dick Cheney too. But,
Yes,
um,
definitely.
did you see that story about the number of Trump administration officials that are now moving to these swanky mansions on military bases
Oh, yeah.
in these
Yeah.
in sort of a bubble within a bunker or a bunker within a bubble, and they're moving into these places where they will not have to interact with any of the unwashed, like the voters, the electorate. So they're living in these compounds with one another, only seeing one another. I wonder whether that is just another indication of how they have become kind of hermetically sealed, that they just don't know. But the arrogance, and by the way, if you are the populist president of the United States, why do you behave this way? It's just like, it's sort of like we have the power, fuck everybody else. We're going to do any of this stuff. But I can't think that it's helping him that much
Well,
outside of his own bubble.
and I was gonna say, but why doesn't anybody care? But you know what? Actually, if you look at the approval ratings, he is not doing well. And I think that
No,
we're gonna have three Democrats probably win three big races tonight as we record this. And then you've
hopefully.
got Donald Trump's approval ratings. Even in the economy.
57%.
In the
Yeah.
economy, Charlie, his approval ratings in the economy are in very bad shape right now. And so maybe the chickens are coming home to roost belatedly.
Well, I do wonder, and I think I said this last week, and this was before they, partially restored the SNAP benefits. If there are pictures of bread lines, around the country, that is just not going to help the populist president. I mean, his whole shtick is that I'm for you. The other guys, these elitists are for the other guys. I am for you. And then he holds the Gatsby party and shits on people and tears down the East Wing, and people are going,
Yeah.
"Hey, what's kind of?" Oh, not to mention, the peace president every single day comes up with a new country we're going to go to war with. Is it going to be Venezuela? No, maybe
Yeah.
Mexico. Oh, wait, maybe Nigeria. So did I see that he has a 63% disapproval rating in the CNN poll? 63%,
I think so, yeah.
which is
Not
about
good.
which is about what he had when he left office after January 6th. So I don't know. He thinks he's got the wind at his back. And here's the thing, Matt. Who's going to tell him this poll sucks? I mean,
Yeah.
there are no adults in the room, but in that world that he's created, who's going to say, "Mr. President, look at these numbers here"?
And
Because
Charlie, you never know. I don't want to root against America, and I don't know what the future holds.
no,
But it just as an analyst, my guess is it gets worse. Mm. If we look at sort of these like economic indicators, you've got AI, which has basically been boosting the stock market. You've got these, it's called the Magnificent Seven, right? The only thing working in the stock market are these seven tech companies. Nvidia, Amazon, stuff like that. That's driving the stock market. If you're a normal American, you're not invested in that, you're not doing well, right? Also, the data centers, the construction of these AI data centers, I think has fueled the construction and all sorts of things like that. But what happens? We're starting to already see it where people are being laid off, they're being replaced by automation. So AI, I think, has been a help to Trump up until now. I think it's going to turn against him in the next 3 years. You've got the tariffs, which, on again, off again, and all that. But I think eventually that's certainly going to fuel the affordability problem. And then immigration, Charlie. I mean, we look at it from a human rights, sort of understandably from a human rights context. But the truth is that immigration, I think, is going to affect the economy. It's going to be hard to find workers, sort of, at the
Really is.
at that level, construction workers, folks like that. But also, I mentioned that those magnificent seven, those seven companies, I think it's four of the seven of those CEOs were foreign born, which is to say that, innovators, people who are going to build tomorrow's products, we may be keeping them out of the country by virtue of raising the cost of some of these visas that would allow, tech folks into the country. So,
This is a really good point. Yeah, I was thinking back to a conference that I was MC of for like the big business group here in Wisconsin. This was back in the before times, before Donald Trump, before came down the golden escalator, before immigration became this toxic issue. And they had a demographic speaker, speaking to this business group, and he was talking about the incredible benefit we got from population increase and from immigration and how if you really wanted to grow the economy, make the economy prosperous, you needed more people, and particularly you needed more immigrants. And he showed what would happen, what our GDP would be if we did not have any immigration. And it was very, very, very compelling, and it was not considered controversial with that group at that time. But you're right,
mhm,
we are shutting off all those things. So can I mention some good news, bad news though, since we're into the bad news
please,
thing? Okay,
please.
so the bad news is you probably saw this overnight. Trump had one of his absolutely insane Truth Social posts where he's demanding the end of the filibuster so that Republicans can pass every bit of legislation they want and make sure the Democrats never get into power. Okay, so that's that. The good news is, as far as I can tell so far, this is incredibly rare, so it's worth mentioning, is Republicans are not giving
Yeah,
into on this, right? They're
yeah.
not gelding them, they're not engaging in the self-gelding of abolishing the filibuster. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and John Thune has mostly been weak, but remember early on, when Trump basically said, "I want you to fast track all of these confirmations," and
Yes,
Thune
right.
was like, "No, we're not going to do that. We're going to have hearings. We're going to do it the right way." And this is really maybe just the second time that Thune is kind of standing up. But I don't know if you saw it, Charlie. It was kind of humorous on 60 Minutes where Nora
Yeah.
O'Donnell said to Trump, like, well, Senator Thune says he's not going to nuke the filibuster. And Trump was like, oh, that's too bad. Like something like that. I don't remember the exact words, but it's really, oh, that's too bad. So it seems
That
like
was a
Trump,
strange interview.
it was weird, right? But it
Did you
seems like
watch the
Trump
whole
is
thing?
accepting. I did
Yeah.
not watch the whole thing in its entirety,
No, I didn't
but
either.
I've
No.
I've listened to a couple of podcasts that went through, pretty much all the highlights and lowlights.
Yeah, it was
So I
it
didn't
was
have to.
unfortunate. And then, look, I mean, I am not rooting for CBS to become completely enshittified, but and Nora O'Donnell, I think, is a very solid journalist, but this was not one of the great moments in 60 Minutes. But what did you make of that bizarre episode where he's asked about the crypto billionaire
Yeah,
who he just pardoned? I mean,
easy.
this is one of the most corrupt things in an incredibly corrupt administration. And this guy had, pled guilty to, not following money laundering rules. The government has, really, highlighted all of his dangers, etc.
Yeah, like
And so he's
helping
pardoned.
transactions that went to child predators and terrorist groups and hostile regimes. This is
Not good.
bad, bad
This is
stuff.
bad stuff. So
Yeah.
they asked Trump about why did you pardon this guy? And he says, I don't know who he is. I mean, what do you mean you don't know it? You just pardoned him last week. Yeah, I heard he got a raw deal like me. So apparently you
Yeah.
walk in and said, this guy is like you, Donald Trump. He was convicted by Joe Biden. But
Who
if
told
Joe
him that?
Biden would have said,
Who told him that? That should have been the follow up. Mr. President, who told you that?
"Mhm,
Because if it's his kids, and by the way, I'm sure you're aware, Charlie, that this guy, Sleazy Ceasy, is finding ways to funnel money to the
kids,
meme coins or whatever that the Trump family is making millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars
everybody's
from.
figured that out, right? Is like,
Yeah.
have Eric call me, says the president of Indonesia. Okay, so what makes this somewhat ironic is, of course, the administration is all in that Joe Biden's pardons, which, by the way, I was very critical of, that Joe Biden's pardons were invalid because they were done with an auto pen, that he didn't know what he was doing. And then you have Donald Trump coming out and say, yeah, I have no idea about this guy that I just pardoned. If Biden would have said something similar to that, like, I did I pardon that person? I have
Oh my
no
gosh.
idea.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And yet,
And,
and yet
and
he does
what,
it.
but, and yet who knows if is he out to lunch? Is he playing dumb? Because Charlie, the
Either
aforementioned,
explanation is uh,
either one is disqualifying. Either one is disqualifying. But you know, he said the same thing about Nick Fuentes after he had dinner with Nick Fuentes. Said he didn't know who he was. He just showed up. Kanye brought him. Remember the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025. Trump's like, I've never seen it. Don't know what this is. We're not going to do it. So this might just be bullshit, to use a term
uh,
of art.
no, I'm going with probably the bullshit. He's been doing this. I don't know the guy. I mean, actually, again, none of this stuff is new. Go back to 2015, 2016. Remember when he was asked about David Duke, the former KKK leader who would endorse him? He said,
Yeah.
"I have no idea who that is." And then people unearthed the fact that you've interviewed him, you've been on this show, you've done all this stuff. So the and then of course you have the trickle down effect of the cluelessness where Mike Johnson has to on a daily basis say, never heard that story, have no idea. I don't know what's going
Yeah.
on. I'm so busy doing
The Paul Ryan playbook. I haven't
yeah,
seen
but
that
but
tweet yet.
he's taken this to a different level. It's like
Mhm.
I mean, since basically they're not doing anything, since he shut down the entire House of Representatives, it's not like he's all busy all day, but apparently reads no news, knows nothing, never heard of anything. Great, wonderful.
Charlie, we've
And
covered a lot of ground, but before we get out of here, I feel like we should
Cheney,
maybe
wow.
talk a little bit about Dick Cheney, former vice president. Did you ever? I never met him. Did you ever
I
interact with
did.
him?
I
Wow.
did. Back in the before times. I did, and of course, I spent some time with Liz Cheney, back in 2024. Look, look, everybody's legacy is complicated. Everybody's legacy is mixed. Let's just stipulate that right up front. But I think that,
His is more complicated and more mixed than most, though. Right? I mean, we're
well,
talking
I mean,
about
think about his
hero and
career.
villain. Yeah.
Well, but think about his career and all the things that he did over the years. I mean, what an amazingly packed life. But I think that his real legacy was, his final act, where he saw Donald Trump for who he was, called him out in the strongest possible language, stood with his daughter Liz, and you know what? It cannot have been easy for him to have endorsed Kamala Harris. I mean, that was that was jumping off the plank. But if you look at those videos where he said, what a coward Donald Trump was, what a liar Donald Trump was, how he was the greatest threat to our democracy in more than 230 years. Dick Cheney went all out, and Liz, in their final act, remember they actually reached out to all the other former secretaries of defense to get them to sign a letter right before January 6th saying that the military should have no role in elections. And so he played an active role. So I have to tell you, though, I'm dreading the horseshoe effect in our politics. Does everybody know what the horseshoe effect is? That at a certain point, the right and the left, say the same thing. The left still hates his guts. They still think he's a villain. The MAGA right is going to be as churlish and ungracious as
Yeah.
possible. You just know what Donald Trump is going to do about this. And so we're going to get this. And so I want to stand up and say, you know what? In the end, Dick Cheney got it absolutely right, and he showed incredible character and incredible courage.
Has Trump weighed in yet as of this recording? You haven't seen anything? It
I
kind of
haven't
was
seen it.
breaking news as we started this.
It'll be awful.
Charlie, there's a lot to say, but the one thing I was thinking about this morning, and this maybe escapes. This is not the first thing most people think of, but that debate in 2004, Dick Cheney debates Joe Lieberman, and they're seated. It's a seated debate. I think
That would be
Larry
2000. Yeah. By 2004 was somebody else.
was it was it
Uh,
2000? Okay, so we're talking 25 years ago. You're right because it
yeah.
was Kerry Edwards. So yeah,
Edwards, right.
Gore
Yeah.
Gore Lieberman. So you're totally right. Thanks for the call out. So 25 years ago, effectively, um, Cheney and Lieberman debate, and it was the most civil, intellectual, highbrow, in a good way, debate you could ever see,
Mutual respect.
to compare it to what we have today, you would have thought 200 years had passed instead of 25 years. Do you remember
No,
that
this is
debate?
well, you know what, you're reminding me of it, and you think about the substance of those two men, and
Yes, very substantive debate.
how much knowledge, how much experience they brought to the table, and I think that again, there was the mutual respect between the two men, that they didn't despise one another, they didn't feel that the need to vilify one another, or to play to the base how much how despicable the other person was. So you had two intelligent patriots talking to one another about fundamental issues, and that's kind of an indication of the world that's lost, because we're never going to
Yeah.
see that kind of of thing again. And
I mean,
we're
I
not
guess
going to,
the vice presidential debate last year was pretty friendly too, in a weird way, but it was just so phony, and it lacked the gravitas, I would say, and the
but
sincerity.
let's go back to this was 25 years ago. Okay, so I'm at the age where that doesn't feel as long ago as it was, but 25 years ago. But the other thing to remember about the 2000 election is that the loser acknowledged they lost,
Right.
under much more controversial circumstances than took place in 2020. I was not a fan of Al Gore at the time, and yet in retrospect, you look back at his willingness to step aside despite the hanging chads in Florida and all of this stuff. I mean, think about what he could have done. We don't have to imagine it, because we know what somebody as dishonest and cowardly as Donald Trump would do with that election. So, retrospectively, I have so much more respect for both Lieberman and for Gore, what they did back in 2000. But it does feel like that vanished world, doesn't it?
It really does. All right, my friend. Well, we've kept it tight today, but I kind of feel like we've covered a lot of ground and, quite honestly, given everyone their money's worth. But any final thoughts, or did I miss anything?
Well, I mean, we're going to be a lot smarter tomorrow when we see what these elections are. I think these elections they're substantively important, but they're also important for what the narrative is going to be going forward. This could be the night the Democrats really do, get up off the mat. And I think that, again, this almost feels like it's a cliche, but this is the first really big test, because what really matters is not how often you post on social media, or how many letters you write, or even how many rallies you attend. What matters is, do people come out and vote? Are they motivated to vote in the elections? Because nothing's going to matter if MAGA keeps running the table. So
Yeah.
this is a BFD today.
And I think you're right, Charlie. I think if Democrats sort of eke out wins in Virginia and New Jersey, that's good for them. But if they do better, I think there's what Democrats really need. I think there's like an inferiority complex amongst Democrats now. There's a sense of hopelessness. This could be
The one.
a turning point where they start to get the wind at their back, some mojo, and the sense that no, the American public's not with Trump. we have the American public on our side. And like, I think
Right.
that from a psychological standpoint, that is so important.
It is
And
so
I think
important.
there's
And the
no
polls
King's
too.
rallies helped
Yeah.
build that, but this would be the next big step.
No, I agree. I agree with you completely. And these elections are taking place as we're getting these polls showing really dramatic shifts in public opinion among young voters. I mean, we are seeing just a massive cratering of young voters moving against Trump, Hispanic voters who had been Trump curious, going away. Some of the really hard Republican support seems to be getting a little bit softer. So we'll see.
Yeah.
It's
And I
it's
don't know
all it's
if
only
you
going to
noticed
take. Yeah.
that New York Times poll, but so right now, the Real Clear Politics average on the generic midterm congressional ballot, the generic ballot, Democrats are only up by like 2 or 3 points.
Yeah,
The
not
problem with
enough.
that is that in 2018, they were up by 10 at this point in the cycle. But if you look at that NBC poll, they're up by 8. And so I'm wondering, was that an outlier or is NBC picking up on a change that has happened? And let me just, here's something we haven't talked about yet today. The shutdown, the government shutdown,
We need to talk about it. Yeah,
the government shutdown for reasons I don't fully understand. Although I mean, I've got theories, but it is hurting Republicans.
it is. It is.
And we've seen enough polls that is a pattern, a trend that I think is pretty safe to say.
Yeah, no, I think you are seeing this pattern, and that is kind of a surprise because Democrats took a big risk with their position on the shutdown, and yet it seems to be working. These medical costs are kicking in. I mean, people are now experiencing it, and this is not necessarily what they voted for. So I do think that the mood thing is going to be really significant. Um, and unfortunately for Republicans, and I think it was Jonathan Martin wrote this in Politico, one of the big advantages Democrats have is they're running against Republicans who are absolutely terrified of ever breaking with Trump on anything. So, these guys are just locked in to MAGA world. And so are they going to ride it all the way down? Oh, the one thing about the polls, I just want to throw this in. Yes, the generic polls are somewhat even. The question is, are the polls measuring the intensity of voters? Because in places like Wisconsin, we've had a couple of special elections for state Supreme Court where it's very obvious that the Democratic voters are super motivated. They are coming out in massive numbers. There's going to be no Democratic turnout from, I don't think, next year. Now, are MAGA voters going to vote for Democrats? No, but might they stay home
Yeah.
without Donald Trump on the ballot? We just don't know. But the intensity issue, I'm going to pay a lot more attention to the who is more motivated, and are you actually measuring that? Because in off-year elections, that is what turns out to be decisive. And of course, gerrymandering and redistricting, which
Yes. Well, that's the big asterisk. But a lot of things. Here's one, Charlie, that I recently learned from Bruce Melman. And it's that there's only been like 2 times in the modern era where a president, was able to uh, keep the other party from having from taking the House in the midterms. And to do it, you have to have an approval rating in the 60s. Well, Donald Trump's approval rating is not going to be in the 60s. So if Democrats don't take the House this time, that will defy history because historical norms are this should be a year for Democrats for a whole bunch of reasons. So we'll stay tuned, but it starts tonight, Tuesday night, and we'll be smarter next week, as you said, Charlie. Always a pleasure, man.
All right, we will do this again next week.
That's right. If you're following me and not Charlie, follow Charlie. If you're following Charlie and not me, you know what to do. And we'll be back on Tuesday. Hey, guys. Thanks, Charlie.